In part 1, Pat revealed the names of secret extraterrestrial bases hidden away in 4 mountains right here on Earth: Mount Hayes, Mount Ziel, Mount Perdido, and Mount Inyangani. We got all the details on the purpose and function of each one of these bases, blueprints for a UFO, human mind control tactics, infiltration, sleeper agents, and just for good measure, we even dropped into the Bermuda Triangle, where Pat discovered the dark secrets of just exactly what happens to all of those missing people. In this episode, we're going to continue our dig into the infamous Pat Price papers, and he's about to go deeper on the level of that infiltration and influence in just about every pillar of human society you can imagine, gives us an extensive list as to who that is and where it's taking place. We learn about the dissident faction en route to Earth, environment and climate manipulation, Pat's own ability to control the weather, and his intention to reach out to the ETs directly.
Able to explain them as hoaxes, erroneously identified friendly aircraft, meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberration.
Fear of ridicule was the foundation on which the cover-up was placed. But I suspect in something which is as unacceptable as a reality as this phenomenon, no piece of physical evidence would satisfy anybody.
It's taken me a little longer to get part 2 out than I had intended to, so I am sorry about that. I am still down the rabbit hole of investigation as to just how all of this came about, the people involved. I keep getting sidetracked by Pat's death because there is so much interesting stuff there as well, and I am very excited to get to that point because we have a lot to talk about. But I don't want to harp on too much, I just want to jump straight back into where we left off and crack on with all of the sessions that we have yet to cover. At the beginning, you'll see this solar system sketch. Now, it doesn't have a date, nor does it have any writing or information surrounding it at all, so it's hard to know where exactly it come from, and I didn't want to bring it up until it felt a bit more relevant to the session, but we're getting there because you may have noticed towards the end of part 1, Pat starts to refer to a green planet and a purple planet. From what I've been able to gather, this system sketch is supposed to represent where these aliens that are here on Earth originate from, but you might notice that apart from that 9th object that's got the 2 lines going to it from the sun, it looks like an exact replica of our solar system. And that's not just because it's got 8 planets orbiting a star. As crude as this sketch may seem, the actual scale and size that all the planets are in relation to each other, the features that they have, are in fact pretty accurate. And because of how accurate it is, if this is supposed to be our solar system, we can rule out that 9th object being Pluto because the size is just completely irrelevant and off. Now, Pat does refer to the 3rd planet in this system as the green planet, and the 9th one is classed as the purple planet, both inhabited and both at war with each other. He does explicitly refer to Earth and this 3rd planet, which is the green one, as being 2 totally different things, despite the apparent similarities, judging by the sketch. The purple planet, this 9th one, is allegedly the home planet of the aliens that are here on Earth, although there is some on the green planet too, and also the renegade faction that is en route here, well, in 1970. Now, if we were to say that the sketch is our solar system, but because Pat knew he was viewing an extraterrestrial race, he maybe just assumed that this had to be a different solar system, then you could easily enter into this 9th object being a bit of a Nibiru Planet X type situation. But we should never forget that we are dealing with an OT level 3 Scientologist here, so it really could be anything. Alright, now that the cosmology is out the way, let's get back into reading some of these papers. So we've got a date here, which is the 16th of October, 1973. And there was also some comment regarding a renegade fleet from their own home base, Purple Planet. It was reported 10 days ago that a dissident group left of 30 ships. It was projected that they had gone elsewhere, not to this location. Note: this is the first comment I have detected as to a possible defection, unrest, or dissension of any kind. When I get time, I'll follow up and possibly do a scan on the green planet and on the purple one too to determine what's going on. Could be very significant, could explain the increase of agent contact in local areas, faster material gathering, and other unusual phenomena. Just as a little refresher from part 1, when he says agent, these are the abducted, influenced, implanted humans that are here on Earth. Incident rate seems much higher than I had suspected. Looking at some possibilities now. I'll explore them while I monitor the 3 local ships back at their base. I'll have to interject the monitoring into the other to get the time continuum handled. I've not picked up on that line properly before, and now I'm saying it out loud. I have no idea what he means. I understand what the time continuum is and what that means, but that sentence about the monitoring, that as a whole, I've got nothing for you there. No translation provided. I'm sorry, I have not a clue what's going on. Maybe a revolt on home planet, purple. Dissident groups may have broken away and have established bases on Earth. If so, this could pose a serious problem to the regular established bases, as it is common information as to the other locations of primary mission responsibilities. They may infiltrate and take over Earth bases. 3 local units are over Suez Canal. So you can probably see from the page on screen, this has not scanned in very well, or maybe the ink worn out over time. I'm not sure. To be honest, it's not that important. This is only directional information that he's given here. So if you're interested, what we can take away from it is that the aliens are doing a bit of a cruise across the south of Medina. They've gone around the Mediterranean to the Aral Sea, and they've also done a tour over Kiev. So that's that. All 3 are in communication. The dissidents may be located elsewhere and make new contact with all known Homo sapien agents to cause upset. Other possibility is Green Planet may be making a move on Purple Planet. I already know that they have their own agents infiltrated into power lines of Purple Planet. This may be the opening gun on total takeover of Purple by Green. In any event, sure looks interesting as hell. I'll try not to be so busy as to not neglect the area for at least the next week or so. So it seems like we've got some 1970s alien drama going on there, and then we move into our next session, which is just the day after, on October the 17th, 1973, and is dated received by H.E. Putoff on the 18th. Decided to pull into this area. What area he means, I don't know. That is one of the issues that we'll be addressing very soon. Some units are here to test perceptic ability. Noticed last night they arrived in general area about a half hour after I finished my scanning. Going to see if the same technique works tonight. If it does, there should be sightings around 9:05 to 9:30 coming in from northwest. Should hit land 20 miles north of Port Reyes and fly on course towards Fresno. From Fresno, should turn due west and hit coast between Vandenberg and Pismo Beach, then up to the coast to Monterey Bay, and then back to our valley again. Should stay in our area for at least 1 hour. I plan to go outside in a few minutes with my binoculars and watch out for them. 7:37, going outside now. 8:36 p.m. Stayed for an hour, didn't see a damn thing but some aircraft. I'll scan and see where the hell they are. Felt absolutely sure they'd come in tonight. I feel Pat's pain here. He's been seeing all of this in his mind for weeks. He's a tried, tested, and proven remote viewer, so he has good reason to trust what it is that he sees. And finally, he feels like he's got enough data that if he just goes outside and waits, he will get a glimpse of one of these UFOs with his own eyes. And then, nothing, which is kind of the way this always goes. Looked at Site 1, still working on equipment. Doesn't seem to be anything unusual going on. About same number of personnel, although the launch recovery area is empty. Generally 5 or 6 units in secondary area. Must have put out all available units. Incidentally, the units from this base have a hull marking that looks like this. Looks like it's etched, not painted, kind of frosty colour on metal. I did actually reverse Google image search some of these sketches that he did. I just wondered if there was anything from experiencer stories or other reported sightings, even potentially some occult symbols, but I did not manage to find anything. Taking a look at the communication system I wrote about the other day. The setup is unreal. I noticed the inval buttons trying to work, so I must be right. So here goes. Okay, we have reached our first Scientology decode of the episode, and this isn't one that's too hard to wrap your head around. These words do mean what they mean to us, except for Scientology has their own symbolic definitions for them. So Pat's taken a closer look at the communication systems that we went through in detail in part 1, and he's finding it all very profound and mesmerizing. And then he says, I noticed the inval button's trying to work, so I must be right. Inval is just short for invalidation, and invalidation, in the words of L. Ron Hubbard himself, means any effort to suppress or ridicule a person's reality or beingness. Invalidation is a major suppressor of a thetan. It makes him doubt his own perceptions. And then we have buttons, and that is the official Scientology term for engram restimulators. Now, if you remember in part 1, we covered about these engrams that are like traumatic or negative memory implants, and buttons are essentially the trigger for restimulating that feeling. The same way that us non-Scientologists use the word buttons as well. We'll say something like, you are really pushing my buttons today. So when he notices that the inval buttons are trying to work, he can feel the aliens hitting his doubt switch to make him think that these comm systems that he's looking at are fake. But since he's a Scientologist and he can feel that button being pressed, that's why he feels like he knows he is dead on target. The headband fits around the head of person transmitting. Band is non-metallic. Inside the band are metal contacts about the size of a pea. 2 are in the front over forehead, 2 are just above temples, 2 in rear of head, about 1 inch from point of the atlas. Sender thinks of a picture message. The contact points transmit separate portions of thought pattern into an amplifier. Signal gets boosted and then is transmitted via an antenna. I observed one in use and saw that sender was turning up output and after message turned both down. I know this all sounds a bit sci-fi, but we do basically have this tech, and to be honest, I don't even think that we need headbands in order to do this anymore. And even though we also had things like this in 1970s, I imagine to Pat this kind of looked like a bit of a psychic walkie-talkie system. Looking around Site 1 and see some portable units in a work area. They're changing something in them, possibly the frequency range. There are 200 to 225 in there. Going to Site 2, same there. All units away, none in launch recovery area or in secondary parking area. I'll try 3, same here. Try Site 4. There is one hell of a lot of units here. Looks like a general conclave. Place is packed, plus 2 home units. They are much larger than the locals. Just a quick one for some clarity. When he's saying units, he means one of these groups of aliens. He's just using the term like the military or the police, probably because he does have a police background. And when he says the home groups have arrived, that will be the Purple Planet dwellers, and apparently they are much larger than the local Earth-based groups. One of the larger units has a system. Each one of the personnel there is getting a new identity imprinted in chest area. Noticed imprint can't be seen but can be read on a scope. It appears that each one will get the new imprint tonight. After tonight, anyone at bases without new ID gets the works. There is a briefing for security officer personnel regarding new ID system. Portable units are to be taken back to their respective sites and set up to scan all personnel incoming and departing. Anyone without paper ID is to be eliminated at once. Whew, harsh. Then Site 4 is to be notified. There may be 3,000 to 3,500 personnel that left home bases on the loose here, and this is the procedure to detect and handle them. Also, from now until further notice, Site 4 will issue all flight orders and control all flights. They are going to use a sequence procedure to detect any other units that are in any quadrant that do not coincide with sequence procedure. All bases are to remain on alert and to attack and destroy any units not accounted for. Looks like a breakthrough. Could change all prior sightings and contact. I'm not actually sure here if he means breakthrough as in like a revelation, or if he means that this dissident group have broken through their process and that's going to change the way they do things going forwards. That is not very clear. Now we've got no date here, but the handwriting on the document does change, so I think it's safe to assume that we're into a new session. I somehow have the feeling that smog situations are a deliberately created condition. In fact, I could state that the area of air immediately above the smog belt is in fact ionized. In exploring exploring the thought, it comes to me that installations are planted and activated remotely to create the conditions to cause the smog. The idea seems to fit. We certainly have spent billions on smog abatement. Fits the psycho-political pattern too, i.e., interiorize attention on an artificial problem by pointing at threat of survival of the problem, then trigger your agents to beat the drums and keep attention focalized. Also, spend control. Spend to bring the problem under control works beautifully too. Very cunning. While I'm in the mood, I'll write a list of the activities they are directing. 1. Financial. 2. Ecology. 3. Religion. 4. Minority factions. 5. Prison reform. Note, they select titles for their groups that make it impossible to differ with or rebuke, i.e., Keep America Beautiful, National Auto Safety, etc. 6. Women's Lib Group. 7. I'm just going to say Triple K because honestly, I'm in the UK and I don't know what I'm allowed to say anymore. 8. Black Panthers. 9. Veterans groups, American legacy, vets of foreign wars. Their method is to create and finance a pressure group, implement the program, then leak info and create/finance the opposition group and third party the hell out of things as long as it will last. Sure keeps attention fixed and directed. Again, sounds all too familiar, and if you know anything about NGOs, fronts, cutouts, COINTELPRO, chaos, even the problem action solution system that we reside within, where the ideas and the money flows from, then you will find yourself very quickly in the land of the lizards. Decided to look at the storm that is presently hitting the area as there are certain characteristics that appear unusual. Wind is out of the south, gusty, intermittent heavy rain, but there is something about the storm that doesn't feel right. Just as I wrote that last line, I got the feeling that there was a relationship of interspace connections in the storm. It would fit certain conjectural points that I have considered. Alright, so it's about to get a little Ted Owens PK man over here, so buckle up. In the past 2.5 years, I have been able to control the weather over very wide areas. To remove any doubt as to the fact I was controlling the weather or looking into future time track and just predicting the weather, I have reversed wind flows, moved various layers of clouds in different directions, stopped heavy gale winds on command, created temperature inversions, and moved weather patterns to very unusual departures from 100-year cycles. And I started this particular ability in Hawaii. There was 120 straight days of rain, heavy enough to knock out construction for that period of time. There were many editorials and newscasts on the unusual weather there. When I returned to LA, one of my friends mentioned that she hated rain and cold. LA had the lowest rain and total and mildest weather in the last 100 years. That was the winter of 70 to 71. Moved to Lake Tahoe in mid-spring 72. Another friend suggested an early heavy winter was desirable. Heavy snows but substantially earlier and very heavy or winter clear into late May. The reason I relate this is to note that I am not unskilled in handling weather, particularly when I have an immediate interest involved. This storm has some very unusual characteristics. 1. Wind from south in circular pattern. 2. Collision of warm front moving up from south colliding with cold front moving down from north. 3. Highs and lows of 1,500 mile north to south not of generally expected prior pattern. There are some highs where there should be lows, etc. Very unusual. Now the fact that I'm not doing it and it's happening here interests me. So I'm going to find out the source. Alright, I've cut out the bulk of the next section because it's an extremely analytical observation about weather patterns and conditions in general, which will mean very little to you if you are not a geophysicist. But if you are into that kind of thing, there are links in the description to this entire document if you ever want to take a look at this yourself. The atmosphere in vicinity of Gulf of California has been overbalanced on positive charge in atmosphere. Not normal. Pattern of high-low in western US is not normal or usual. It occurs to me that one could do considerable travelling at fairly low altitudes and not be observed in this type of weather pattern. In fact, it's ideal. Then any unusual occurrence can logically be accounted for by the unusual weather. Any strange flashes of light could well be power transformers, etc. Checking for any craft now in the air below 300,000 feet. There are 7. That was quick. Group 1, 10:54 p.m. 1. Vandenberg area. 2. Maroc Edwards vicinity. 3. Cruising above Owens LA Aqueduct. 4. over Livermore area. Group 2, 1 northwest Reno, Nevada, 2 above Mount Ridge, Santa Cruz to Pacifica, 3 just south of Coos Bay, or working a pattern from coast to 30 miles inland down to Crescent City, California. Without looking specifically at this time, I've concluded that we have a comparatively new hidden installation in that particular area. Their search pattern makes me certain they have located it on a mapping area. 1 topographically, 2 infrared, 3 sonically. It occurs to me that the locals are in search for intruders. That's why they're trying to locate. As I scanned each unit, I located what I thought analytically they would be interested in that area. When I get off the analytical band, I am just going to jump in and say here, because this is the second time he's brought this up, and just in case you're not sure what it means, I am going to have to assume that this equates to the modern day remote viewing term of AOL, which stands for analytical overlay, which essentially means that instead of trying to just perceive things objectively without applying it to any of your known frameworks or making assumptions, that you are instead perceiving it and trying to fit it into something and letting those patterns and connections overlay what you see so that you can put a term to it, essentially, instead of just saying what you see and not trying to correlate it with anything. I realised that each of the areas has very remote, isolated areas around, ideal for a dissident group to find temporary sanctuary in. In fact, I just located 3 on the ground east of Alanka, California, in very high mountains east of Mount Whitney. Couldn't figure out why Unit 3 of Group 1 was cruising that godforsaken stretch of country. I don't know anything about that area, so I'm sorry if that offends you on behalf of Pat. 10:55 p.m. I feel like I should be doing that in a Geordie accent because it's like being the Big Brother narrator, but I am going to refrain. I note that locals are armed to the teeth and seem very nervous. Have never seen them like this before since I've been scouting them. In both of the ship line are launchers, 3 in each section, a total of 12 launchers. Unit inside looks like a ramjet with atomic warhead, looks very efficient, looks like they are guided by laser and can see video display in forebay of ship. 3-dimensional display looks like a fire control center, very sophisticated. We'll look in detail later, and diagram. Also note change in uniform. Material looks much different, gives impression of pressure suit in lieu of flexible clothing, plus solid helmet, self-contained. Also 3 smaller attack craft in aft section of craft. Haven't seen this size unit before. 11:10 p.m. Have to end for now, have company coming. Now, if I'm reading this correctly, it seems to me like Pat is inferring that we've got another base on our hands here, which would be either in Nevada or California, that isn't clear, or at least some sort of setup for these newly arrived purple planet beings, much to the displeasure of our local locked and loaded aliens. So we've got nothing for November. We are making a bit of a jump here, and the next session is Thursday, 6th of September 1973. Looks like the checkout is over. Not a clue what that means. I feel like context is missing here. There should be a number of sightings over the southwest part of US and over Australia for the next several weeks. The dissident group was able to maintain their whereabouts from the locals. Should be very exciting and humorous as the second group now intends to fly too. The local beings will think their extra sightings are the result of overactive imaginations of some of the Homo sapiens. The funny part is they were the first to plant the idea that the sightings were due to overactive imagination. Now they will fall victims to their own propaganda. No danger at all. It should take about 6 months for the locals to get the idea that the extra sightings are valid, then it will be interesting. By then they will realise the impact of what has happened. Then the cat and mouse game will start up again. The second group will hide again, and locals will do another 6-week checkout. Should be good for at least 1.5 years. Still no danger, as by that time the locals will realise they haven't come under attack and know that the second group intends them no harm. That looks like the best time for personal contact. The local commander will put out a tentative feeler for a meeting with the second group commander, and when that happens, I plan to make contact and offer to act as a mediator. What business does Pat have being the human mediator of 2 alien species. That way we could all have a safe space and a great deal could be accomplished to take the mystery off the lines. I know that I could convince them that we are not all criminals. At least it could be the first meaningful tentative step in the right direction. I just checked the 4 major bases and they are going back in routine normal operation. I don't have the complete handle on the 6-week ground cycle. It seems that a unit grounded for 6 weeks needs a recharge or recycle for the propulsion system, and the locals feel that they are the only ones on this planet that has the material for the recharge. I'll have to check that out later on. I'll check Site 3 as the material must be located there. Also, I'll check Group 2's location as I know they are operational, so they must have brought a new system with them. Well, that's all for now. 8:50 p.m. Okay, well that really is all for now because we are about to take a bit of a U-turn. There is a reason for that, and we will be discussing that very soon. These individuals can best be detected by the following lines, and I just want to say that based on the last session and what we've been discussing so far, for all intents and purposes, it would look as though he's talking about the aliens, because we're about to get into all of the positions and institutions that have been influenced and infiltrated, but he's not actually talking about shape-shifting reptilians or anything non-human at all. He's actually referring to the people that have been programmed or influenced, implanted. It doesn't say that, it doesn't say anything, it just says these individuals can best be detected by the following lines, and then goes into the lists that we're about to get into. But these are humans, so just know that. So now he's going to give us titles, not necessarily names, but for the ones where we get a specific title, you could just literally look up who this person was in 1973 and make your own minds up. Some of them are groups, so again, you could do the same. Honestly, none of them are surprising. Science field. 1. Most renowned physicist with published works used in advanced physics fields used in major universities, etc. 2. Set selves up of coordinators of field. 3. Rhodes Scholars. 4. Work under the grants of 1. Rockefeller Foundation, shocker. 2. Ford, another shocker. 3. International Science Foundation. 4. World Federal Mental Health. 5 is a separate category, but unfortunately we have a blank there. Space fields. 1. US Chairman and US Senate of Space Communications. 2. Chairman of the House of Space Communications. 3. Director of the Space Center, Houston, NASA. 4. Director of the Computer Center, NASA. 5. Advisor to the President on Space. Next group, Soviet bloc. 1. Chairman, Scientific Space Research, Cosmic Research. 2. Scientific Advisor to Supreme Soviet President, Gorky. I don't know if that's a mistranslation in the papers here, or if he actually said Gorky. I don't know if that's... This has got to be Gorbachev, and now I can't get Gorky out of my head. Gorky, what? I'm second guessing myself now. I'm pretty sure there's not a K. Gorbachev. He was still knocking around in 1973, wasn't he? He was like into 90s, so maybe I just never heard of Gorky as his little pet name before. But him, his Supreme Soviet it says Presidium. It's all going wrong. 3. Department Director of Internal Security, USSR. 4. Chairman Department Physical Sciences, Moscow University. 5. Secretary to Chairman, Presidium. Now we've got energy fields. 1. Chairman Sierra Club, US. 2. Space Advisor to Presidential Energy Resources, US. 3. Chairman of the International Energy Commission, US. 4. Director of the New Energy Resources, US, Ford and Rockefeller Foundations. 5. Chairman of the Board of Saucony Vacuum, in brackets Mobile, US. I don't know what that is, but I'm sure the Americans do. 6. Deputy Director of the Nuclear Energy Commission, US. Next, we move to the church, and just remember, this is coming from Pat, not me, so don't get offended. 1. The Archbishop of Canterbury, England. 2. Presiding Chairman, College of Cardinals, Rome. 3. Grandmaster, Masonic, that is very broad. 4. Assistant to Council of 12, LDS. 5. Presidential World Federation of Churches. Education. 1. Chairman Selection Commission for Rhodes Scholars. 2. Director of Physical Sciences, Harvard. 3. Dean, School of Law, Harvard. 4. Dean of Business, Yale. 5. Coordinator Advisor on Education, HEW. 6. Dean of Social Sciences, Columbia. 7. Director of Education, Advisor to BS of A. 8. Presidential Teachers of America. 9. We've got another blank. Our last and longest list is the financial sector, which should come as no surprise to anyone. 1. Chairman of the Board of the US Reserve Bank, and actually most of these are Chairman of the Board titles, so I will say where they're not, but otherwise just presume that that is the position, and I'm just going to run through the banks. 2. World Bank. 3. Soviet Monetary Bank. 4. Bank of China. 5. Finance Minister, France. 6. Chancellor of Exchequer, Bank of England. 7. Back to Chairman of the Board, Rockefeller Foundation. 8. Ford Found. 9. Bank of Tokyo, in brackets Mitsubishi. 10. Banco de Mexico. 11. Finance Director of Argentina. What a shock horror. Is the insinuation there that the bankers rule the world? So on those lovely lists, we bring our Pat Price Papers read through to a close. And if you take anything to the bank from this, then let it be those titles and associated institutes, because regardless of whether or not they're influenced by aliens, they are still all corrupted little devils. And not to worry too much, because in part 1, Pat did actually tell us how to deal with these infiltrated agents, was to find the frequency, replicate it, and bleed off the data by thought transfer, etc., etc., which is a Scientology method, meaning that humanity's fate would be left in the hands of David Miscavige, which is more than bleak. We are far from over in this journey. I want to get into now some of the more modern and historical lore surrounding these 4 mountains to see if there's anything of substance that lends weight to Pat's viewing. And there's no better place to start than with Mount Hayes. Hayes is located within the famous Alaskan Triangle, which is a hotspot for human disappearances. An average of 2,250 people go missing from this region every year. The rate per 1,000 people is more than twice that of the national missing person average, and the rate of people who are never found is even higher. The estimated total vanishings in the last 50 years are between 20,000 to 22,500 people, and unfortunately I couldn't actually find any specific figures of just how many of those people were in or near the region of Mount Hayes itself, but many of these disappearances happen at least within the triangle that Hayes sits in. So I think it goes without saying that is one hell of a lot of people to go missing within a single area. But Alaska is huge, like absolutely huge, and I think for any of my fellow Brits watching, it's hard for us to sometimes really comprehend the scale of just how big a single state in America can be, because we're just such a tiny little island, and for us having to drive somewhere that's over 45 minutes feels like an eternity. So just for a little bit of context, Alaska spans an area that is over 665,000 square miles. Our little island here in the UK is approximately 93,000 square miles, making Alaska alone more than 7 times the size of the UK. We also happen to be one of the most densely populated countries in the world despite our size, with approximately 276 people per square kilometre. Alaska, on the other hand, is extremely sparsely populated, with an average of just 1.3 persons per square mile. Combine that with the fact that the landscape of Alaska is one that you could class as an extreme nature, monolithic mountains, icy glaciers, sprawling tundra plains which cover about half of the state, and dense forests. You can see how when someone gets lost out there or finds himself in trouble and in need of assistance, it is not like calling mountain rescue in the Scottish Highlands. That said, undoubtedly 20,000 people in 50 years, regardless of a harsh and unforgiving environment, does sit firmly at the border of something potentially a little bit stranger going on, and Alaska has been a key player in David Paulides' Missing 411 series for many years. Now, I did find some interesting things about this region, and though the descriptions and names vary from place to place, one of the prevailing themes that emerges from within the collective native Alaskan lore is that of the little people. They are a race of beings that live underground or inside mountains and possesses control over natural forces. In some cases they are benevolent, in others they're spiteful, some outright vengeful. useful. Mount Hayes is in an extremely remote location and no one lives nearby, so I can't give you specific stories from the area, only ones that I found from nearby communities. But I did come across a blog called Alaska Village to Village, where the writer details their visits across all the Arctic communities and recounts and records the native population stories relating to these supposed little people. And I'll read you a passage from that stuck out to me. One village was unanimous in its abject fear of the little people. The unanimous belief was that anyone who caught sight of the little people would go missing for at least a year. Supposedly, these poor souls spend the year underground in captivity and occasionally never came back. Some people I spoke with were convinced that the missing ones were eaten or enslaved. Others believed they were enjoying life amongst the little people and now peacefully live with them underground. A local man I was working with told me how his uncle had been hunting with a friend. Let's call them Eugene and Cameron. These two native Alaskan hunters were described as being excellent marksmen and exceptionally talented at navigating the hazards of the untamed expanses. They'd been tracking a big caribou herd for a while and eventually caught up with them in the mountainous valley. Eugene and Cameron got a good vantage point to select their targets. Using binoculars, Eugene scoped out the herd while Cameron took a quick moment for a smoke. Despite the remote location, Eugene spotted a curiosity. A trio of hunters on the far side of the valley. They'd killed and were cleaning a massive bull. Or so it seemed. Something was off though, and Eugene pointed this out to Cameron, who stopped smoking immediately to take a look. Cameron pulled out his rifle and zeroed the powerful scope on the three hunters. He quickly realised why the scene was so perplexing. The trio wore traditional indigenous clothing, handmade from hides and lacking any of the trappings now common among modern native Alaskans. It was stressed upon me that no one wears the old garb nowadays, except for ceremonies and holidays, and especially not to hunt. Other anomalies were quickly apparent. There were no guns in sight and the hunters' bodily proportions were askew. Big heads with short bodies and commensurate arms and legs, but clearly muscular. All of a sudden, one of the hunters stopped his task and looked up from the caribou. His hand shot up, with his index finger pointing straight to the sky. The other two stopped too and looked at their companion expectantly. In an instant, the arm dropped parallel to the ground with the finger pointed directly at Eugene and Cameron. All three hunters turned their heads at the same time to look at them. Oh, that is... meh. Startled, both flinched, looked at each other and then back towards the trio. But there was nothing to be seen. No hunters, no butchered caribou, nothing. After bagging their own kills, the two friends went to investigate the site where they saw the trio and their bull. Small splotches of blood littered the area. Tiny footprints, like those of children, were scattered around a circle, but there were no traces of tracks leading to or from the spot. Big heads, short bodies, sounds like the Greys to me. On top of these stories of the little people, the Alaskan Triangle has long been riddled with orb and variously shaped UFO sightings, and when you combine that with all of the missing people and the planes, it's not hard to see why this area, and Mount Hayes specifically, is now solidified in high strangeness history. In the case of Mount Perdido, it does have a historical mythical creation story, and there is a lot of old fairy lore that spans the Pyrenees as a whole, but nothing that I found really bears a similarity with UFOs, aliens, or anything that's tied to the modern paranormal notions. You can look into historical fairy, goblin, paranormal type encounters across the world, and quite often they do share parallels with what we see today as an NHI or orb type encounter, just through the lens of a different era, but I didn't find that to be the case here. And I should also note, I actually couldn't find anything about fairies specifically attributed to Perdido, and that could just be from lack of English translations available, but I did try my best and it was all to no avail. But that does not stop the internet from having you believe that this is some sort of intergalactic hotspot, and frankly, that is entirely thanks to Pat and these remote viewing sessions. Perdido is now enmeshed with contactee, experiencer stories, and it even found itself host to a CE5 type event held there in 2022, which of course brought with it a wave of stories of new telepathic alien contact and a flurry of sightings. Now, there was a claim that I came across parroted a few times on various articles and blogs that was attributed to Skip Atwater, and this is what it said. A famous set of caves in the Pyrenees have ancient drawings of ancient astronauts and flying spaceships spacecraft, Atwater explained, and there have been a number of sightings there. I did manage to track this claim down to an article written by Cassandra Frost in 2005. It is now archived, but it was a piece on Skip Atwater and Project 8200, and it reads like she interviewed him, but she doesn't ever explicitly state that to be the case or include a source for where and when Atwater claimed this to be. I had a little look around the rest of her old articles, and she has interviewed Ed Dames, Mel Riley, and done a lot of work on remote viewing pieces. She was very well versed and connected in that world at the time, so I get the impression that she did absolutely have access to and was able to have an interview with Skip. She just hasn't explicitly stated it, but everything else about the piece reads as though she's had a conversation with him. Once I was able to substantiate where that claim originated from, I looked into these cave paintings, and well, here is every single picture I could find of documented discovery, and you can decide for yourself about the aforementioned depiction of ancient aliens and spacecraft. Next, we have Ziel, and like Hayes, it is a mountain that's located in an extremely vast and unforgiving landscape, whereas being buried in a blizzard and freezing to death are on the cards if you attempt to tackle Hayes. Burning to a crisp or severe, unresolvable hydration could take you down on Mount Ziel. Like Perdido, Ziel has its own historical creation story as told by the Aboriginal population of the Northern Territory. But outside of the Aboriginal Dreamtime traditions, paranormal accounts were far more scarce than I'd actually expected them to be. For a long time now, I've heard about Ziel being absolutely drenched in UFO and anomalous activity, but I actually couldn't find a single thing directly connected to Ziel in any of the investigation archives. I tried Awthorne, UFO Research Queensland, Disclosure Australia file, National Archives NAA series on UFO reports, AC UFOs, VUFORs, UFO RNSW. I even looked on international databases like MUFON or NUFOR for references to Ziel, and I just got nothing. And not only that, I couldn't even find a record of the Mimin lights or a Yowie knocking around Ziel, and I really wasn't expecting that. The only first-hand account that I could find on another channel in any sort of detail was a second-hand abduction story about someone who lives nearby Ziel. Apart from that, everything outside of the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories that facilitates Mount Ziel today becoming an alien landmark of the world appears to be because of Pat Price. And thanks to Pat laying that groundwork and Ziel's proximity to Pine Gap, it seems like a combination of all of that and then internet propagation has just led to the ET lore of this place taking on a life of its own. Now, Inyangani, which at the time of Pat's viewings was actually classed as Rhodesia but is now Zimbabwe, actually has more meat on the bone to support its position in the Paranormal Hall of Fame. Locally, it's known as the Swallowing Mountain, and Inyangani has long been held a sacred site inhabited by powerful spirits in local tradition. Now, it's said that the inhabitants of this mountains are not supposed to be the most benevolent kind due to their tendency to push those that incur their wrath off cliff edges. People have also reported compasses and electrical equipment going haywire or breaking out of nowhere. It's also said that the weather around the mountain is something with a devious mind all of its own due to the winds and thick fogs and mists that seem to materialize out of nowhere before stalking hikers in their tracks. Some visitors have also reported becoming dazed, confused, or disorientated for no apparent reason. And there are also accounts of lost time event, unidentified sounds, strange lights, and animals that seem to watch and follow people around. We also have on Inyangani's list of intrigue its disappearances. All I could find on record is an estimated of 8 official cases, but the native community might well be aware of more that just haven't made it into the recorded data. And you might be wondering, well, what about the aliens? Where are the UFOs? Well, for that, enter Credo Mutwa. In 1959, while gathering medicinal herbs near the base of Inyangani, Credo says he was abducted by grey-type entities he refers to as the Mantindani, which he says in Zulu lore are beings his culture has long described as malevolent grey ones who abduct and experiment on people. Frankly, that is the most condensed version of an extremely long tale I'm giving you there, otherwise we would be here all day. Now, I have watched the entire Credo Ike interview before, but apart from that and some surface level digging, I've not gone deep into my research of him. But I will say that when you hear a story like Credo's and it seems to have all the bells and whistles, you start to dance the line of too good to be true. Even with the more limited research that I have done into Credo, that alone would constitute an episode in itself of problematic things about his story. I'm someone that wants to believe and does, albeit loosely, which is why I spent nearly 7 hours of my life listening to a man talk about his reptilian experience with the king of reptilian lore, most of which people would not even entertain 30 seconds of. I don't doubt that something happened to Credo during his life. I just don't think it's quite the same tale as what he told David Icke in 2001, and I think John Mack, who was the first to interview him in 1999, felt the same way. It was in 1999 that Credo first told his story, although it did happen in 1959, which isn't an uncommon thing to do. A lot of experiences carry shame and confusion, and it takes time for them to open up. By 1999, grey aliens, reptilians, UFOs, abduction lore was well and truly entrenched in the collective consciousness, but more importantly, Jim Snabel's book Remote Viewers had already come out in 1997, which gave the public in first time vivid and detailed descriptions about Pat's work on these bases, and as I think it's becoming clear, this changed the landscape for these mountains forever and made them ripe for future claims. Apart from Credo, I couldn't locate any other documented NHI cases attached to Inyangani or the surrounding community. And if you're shouting at me through the screen right now saying, well, what about the Ariel school? That was in Zimbabwe too. Yes, I know, but that is over 250 kilometers away. Not to say that it couldn't somehow be tied, but that would be pure speculation. It's like claiming a UFO landing in Aberdeen is somehow directly connected to Ben Nevis just because both of them are in Scotland. The thing is, there could well be more activity going on in these places than is actually known. Unless someone goes public with their story, we can never truly know what's taking place on every corner of this planet at all times. And even if someone does come forward, unless their story gains enough algorithmically satisfying traction, it falls into the ever-deepening void of deemed irrelevant internet content. What is very clear to me though is that Pat started continent-spanning fires that are still very much blazing to this day. Trying to research around these places without the influence or mention of Pat's sessions, further fueled by the Stargate Military Viewers Project 8200 work, is exhausting. These 1973 claims of Pat are now burnt into the UFO cultural zeitgeist, and because Pat has a legacy attached to him as one of the greatest remote viewers of all time, and that he allegedly did all of this of his own accord, seems to have curbed the usual skepticism of a disinfo campaign that shadows this whole area of research. But how sure are we that no one else had a hand in this? Has anyone checked to see if those with intelligence backgrounds who have lied to us before, that to this day push Pat's alien bases narrative, always with that caveat attached that he did all of this on his little lonesome, don't in fact have their fingerprints all over it? Or take the agency involvement out of the equation entirely. Say Pat did do all of this of his own accord. Does anyone wonder why he might be inclined to do so? Going through every page and every word with you was intentional because a lot of headline-worthy statements about these sessions get wielded around, but without all the context required to make an accurate, well-reasoned judgment on whether or not Pat's claims hold any water. Yes, he named 4 alien bases. Yes, he claimed entities inside, and yes, he saw UFOs there too. But now that you've heard everything else that he has to say past the sensational headlines, the deeper insight into the way his mind works, the Scientology overtone shaping everything that he does, I wonder, and feel free to let me know in the comments, if this has changed the way you feel about these claims at all. If it hasn't, then fair enough. Project 8200 sure makes this all feel a lot more plausible, or at least it certainly used to for me. All I know, whilst I'm still in the thick of trying to find answers to all of this, is that what I used to find compelling has dwindled, and the tiny fragment of trust I had for the people involved in Psi research has evaporated. I mentioned in part 1 that right from the beginning of my research for these episodes, the more I dug into Pat, these papers, his death, SRI, and those involved in the early Psi research programs, the more derailing it all became, and that I just had to get through these 2 episodes, focusing directly on the papers themselves, or else I never would. Well, it's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed indulging in the weirdness, but I am gonna have to pull the plug on the party, or at least turn up the dimmer switch on the lights just a little bit. Now, I know I said that I would get into some of my findings and personal feelings about these sessions in part 2, and I didn't mean to lie, but it turns out that I have twice, actually. First confession is that I cannot actually give you my findings yet because I just need more time to follow a couple more of these loose threads, and I don't want to give you an incomplete version of this story. My second and final confession is that I also told you in part 1 that on November 2024, for the first time, the full and complete Pat Price papers were released to the public. I said that because I thought it was true. It appears that way for all intents and purposes, and we're told that that's the case. And now I'm telling you, we absolutely do not have the full Pat Price papers.